'Cause I got spurs that jingle, jangle, jingle,
Jingle, jangle,
as I go riding merrily along.
jingle, jangle,
And they sing, oh, ain't you glad you're single?
jingle, jangle,
And that song ain't so very far from wrong.
Jingle, jangle.
Oh, Lily Bell,
Oh, Lily Bell.
oh, Lily Bell.
oh, Lily.
The 1940s were a period of immense change and cultural modernization. The 40s began with hard times, as World War II gave way to strict regulations on media, clothing, food, and materials. However, after the war was over, the people of the U.S. experienced a time of great prosperity. New inventions, such as the Frisbee and Slinky, made the market for children's toys grow into one of the largest industries in the U.S. Strides in the medical field, which included the birth of the kidney dialysis machine and the methods in which penicillin were produced, also added to the growing medical field in the U.S. With these advancements also came many extraordinary technological developments. The television industry took a great leap forward with the first full-color TV sets. That soon began to fill thousands of homes each year.
The sound picture you are about to see and hear comes to you through the lens and loudspeakers of the new RCA 16mm motion picture sound projector, which is finding wide use by public schools for educational work, industrial sales organizations, and homes. This RCA projector and its sound equipment were developed by the same engineers responsible for the marvelous lifelike sound in the world's largest theater, the Music Hall. RCA photophone sound is used in over 6,000 movie theaters in the United States and throughout the world.
The jukebox was invented in 1948 and gave way to on-demand music. Any adult or child could walk down to the local drugstore and play music for a small fee at their command. The 40s were also a time of a cultural shift. Music superstars such as Bing Crosby, Nat King Cole, and Frank Sinatra emerged at the forefront of American pop culture. Their styles had never been heard before, and they revolutionized the music field. Another large development was the glamour era in the country. Nearing the end of the 1940s, men and women alike enjoyed dressing formally wherever they went, and wore suits and long dresses to almost all occasions. These extravagant dresses and suits helped to create a boom in the fashion industry, which has lasted until modern times. The 1940s were a time of great economic prosperity due to the boom after the war, and therefore had some of the most iconic pop culture trends in history.
Now to the topic of U.S. politics in the 1940s. During this time, there were many great, bad, and downright awful things that happened. President Franklin D. Roosevelt's actions during this time proved that he was adept at his position and was capable of running the country in such a stressful time. Some of the actions he took was the passing of the Lend-Lease Act, which gave Allied nations vital security during the war, and the destroyers for bases, which meant that the U.S. would be allowed to trade naval ships for ownership of military bases in Bermuda and Newfoundland.
There will be no bottlenecks in our determination to aid Great Britain. We must be the great arsenal of democracy. For us, this is an emergency as serious as war itself.
World War II had also brought an end to the Great Depression, which alleviated the pressure off the government because it provided Americans with jobs and raised incomes in American families. Roosevelt also realized that the war would bring an end to the British Empire and reduce the British influence on the world. The 1940s also had an impact on how the government regulated the Army. Before World War II, the U.S. had no prior history of having a large professional army. FDR's foreign policy changed that, however, and expanded the U.S. military, bringing 16 million Americans into service. The U.S. government also had to deal with the bombing of Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. The bombing made the government realize they needed to focus primarily on armament manufacturing. Other major governmental actions after World War II included the establishing of the Department of Defense, the Central Intelligence Agency, or the CIA, and the National Security Council. After Roosevelt's presidential term ended in 1941, Harry S. Truman took the role of president to continue the success of America. One of Truman's main points for his presidency was to drive communism out of the country. The Truman Doctrine was created to provide political, military, and economic assistance to any democratic nations under threat from internal or external authoritarian forces. Truman also put many policies into action, like creating health insurance, increasing minimum wage, and committing the U.S. to maintaining full employment that was known as the Employment Act of 1946. The Fair Deal in 1949 proposed to enact national health care insurance, federal aid to education, civil rights legislations, funds for public housing, and a new farm program.
In 1929, the U.S. stock market crashed, which led to the Great Depression. During the Great Depression, a quarter of the American population wasn't employed because jobs were so limited. The effects of the Great Depression were still affecting many citizens in the 1940s. About 5 million people were out of work. Another 4 million people were making less than legal minimum wage. The average American salary was around $1,700. But all of this changed with the United States' involvement in the Second World War. With the Second World War taking place, the United States started to manufacture military supplies. This led to a boost in the economy and aided the United States to get out of the Great Depression. The average salary also increased from $1,700 to around $3,000. The United States was also economically weak before the war, but after World War II, the United States came out as the wealthiest and strongest nation in the world. Racial issues against African Americans had increased tremendously. The Ku Klux Klan, also known as the KKK, hung and lynched African Americans. Laws, especially the Jim Crow laws, made life very difficult for African Americans. Schools, movie theaters, neighborhoods, hospitals, and bathrooms were segregated in order to keep from the two races from intertwining. In the 1940s, African Americans faced many obstacles in their daily lives. The African Americans weren't the only ones who were being discriminated. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japanese Americans were also being discriminated. Americans believed that Japanese Americans were spies, and in order to keep them from interacting, Americans placed these Japanese Americans into camps. This racial barrier between whites, immigrants, and African Americans portrayed whites as the dominant race. Before the 1940s, women lived at home, cleaning, cooking, and taking care of the children, while the patriarch of the family would work and make a living for his family. All of this changed. During World War II, when men went off to war, women had to take over the factory jobs and other jobs meant for men. Along with daily jobs, women also joined the armed forces through organizations such as the Waves, the WACS, and the SPARS.
In the early stages of World War II, Americans considered the war to be a European conflict, and they desired to stay out of it.
Another war, not for me. This time America should keep out, and I know I will.
This country should heed the advice of its first president and avoid all foreign entanglements.
Europe fight our own battles. They mean nothing to us.
The AFC, or the America First Committee, included Charles Lindbergh, who encouraged U.S. to maintain its own interests first, remain out of the conflict that they did not belong in the first place. America tried to stay neutral by selling materials to both sides of the war to maintain its economic stability after the Great Depression. A previous notion from the U.S. government to freeze all Japanese assets, thereby ending trade from the nation, would be a key reason for the attack on Pearl Harbor. This attack, on December 7, 1941, would result in the loss of 21 American ships, 188 American aircraft, and 2,403 American lives. After the attack, President FDR declared war upon Japan. This drew a close to America's attempt at isolationism. 4 days after this tragedy at Pearl Harbor, Nazi Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. Across the U.S., panic spread as Americans realized that they had enemies on both coasts. Surging above the fear was a wave of patriotism and outrage. Within 30 days of the attack, over 130,000 American men enlisted for service, ready to fight the enemy. As the wars in Asia and Europe merged, with American troops in the eye of the storm, World War II starts. Towards the end of the war, in 1945, America had finally finished the construction of the atomic bomb. Originally supposed to be fired on Germany, President Harry Truman chose to use this weapon on Japan in an effort to avoid a full-scale invasion. On August 6, 1945, the U.S. dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima, flattening the city and vaporizing countless Japanese. Nonetheless, Japan was stubborn, refusing to surrender. Thus, America dropped another on Nagasaki. Days later, Japan surrendered, marking the end of the Second World War.
and marking the victory for the Americans.
A little bird told me that you love me.
That you love me.
And I believe that you do.
I believe.
This little bird